Hello. In this lesson, we are going to talk about some basics of our topic. Our topic is structures based on sets. Before we dive into this topic, I'd like to clarify some terms, some important terms. Scale, row, and set. Those terms are used sometimes interchangeably in place of each other, which is actually a mistake because each of these terms describes a particular usage of pitch collections. So the first one is scale. It is a collection of pitches arranged in order from lowest to highest or from highest to lowest. For example, a major scale. This is a scale or a whole tone scale. This is the representation of the pitch material in its simplest condition. Row, on the other hand, an ordered set of the 12 pitch classes as employed in the composition of 12-tone music. This is a particular term, specialized term for the 12-tone music. If I begin with C and play all the chromatic pitches upwards, this is a scale, but if I make a special organization of these pitches, which is ready to use as basic for a composition, then it is a row. Maybe you may ask if it is not possible to use a chromatic scale as basis for a composition. Of course, it is possible. There are some examples, for example, Ligeti Wind Quintet, I don't remember the movement exactly, uses a chromatic scale displaced in different octave registers. It is possible, but if we can call it as a 12-tone row, I would say no. Then we would say the composer used 12-tone scale in his composition, but it is not a 12-tone row. 12-tone row means more or less interesting organization of the 12 pitch classes. So, finally, set, which is in direct connection with our topic. The term set normally, but not exclusively, applied to atonal music. As you know, atonal means music which is not tonal, which is also not dodecaphonic, that means which is not 12-tone music. It is something else, meaning a small group of notes, a cell or a unit which is of structural significance. This is the important part. It should be of structural significance. It is not a scale, because it has an organization, an interesting organization. It is also not a row because it doesn't contain all the 12 pitch classes. Debussy's Voila from Preludes, 12 Preludes, Book 1, this is the second one as far as I remember, is a very good example, an early example of structural usage of scales, actually scales, not sets. The piece is in a ternary structure, A, B, A. And in tonal music, the A, let's say we are in E flat major. The A part will be in E flat major, and in the B part, there will be a modulation to the dominant key mostly. That means B flat. And then in the A prime section at the end, it will return back to E flat major again. So the problem in the post-tonal era is there is no functional tonality, or some composers didn't want to use functional tonality, and they looked for the other solutions for the replacement of this tonal structure. If they use a structure like that, ABA, they also needed a contrast here. A contrast in motivic structure, a contrast in the pitch material they used in the, but it was a problem for every composer, and every composer find another solution. So, and this is a very common method to replace the tonal areas with the scales, as we see here. The A section of the piece is based entirely on the whole tone scale. And if we consider there's no tone outside of the scale, you won't see any A natural, you won't see any F natural or C sharp. Actually, only in one measure, you see here G natural and D flat, but this is only once as passing tone, as an effect. But structurally, every pitch used in the piece is belongs to the C whole tone scale until that point. Here, you see B section begins. Debussy needs to introduce a contrasting material, and he used black key pentatonic. So, and this is the end of the B part, and here we see a prom section once again on C whole tone scale. The returning back of the A material is not exactly the same. Note that structure. And I go back to the beginning of the piece. It is a completely different motif here. This is a motif rhythmically varied, and this is just a scale, just the arpeggiation. This is not arpeggiation actually, this is the scale, and here also scale. So this is another feature of the pieces in the 20th century. Although they use sometimes conventional formal structures like ABA, this is one of the most common structures, formal structure in the 20th century music. The A prime at the end is almost never the same as the first one. In this example, the pitch collection, the scale is the same, and that makes the section A prime, but the motifs are not the same. Okay, it is similar. Of course, you see here in the higher register. You see it also here in the lower register, A flat, B flat, see also here. The same motif, but the representation is almost never the same. So, let's listen to the piece. There are some types of pentatonic scales: major pentatonic, minor pentatonic, hirayoshi. The names are not standardized. You may see the same scale with another name in another book. Those are from Koska. Um, then the inversions of the scale, beginning with C and then beginning with D, central point. So, and then there are also synthetic scale. Pentatonic scale is not a synthetic scale because it is a diatonic scale. It could be, for example, if we imagine there's an F and there's a B, it could be a C major scale. It's based on a diatonic scale. But synthetic scales are scales that we cannot relate to any diatonic scale. For example, whole tone scale. This is not a diatonic scale or octatonic scale. Octatonic and hexatonic, actually, they means octatonic consists of 8 pitches and hexatonic consists of 6 pitches. But if you hear only octatonic scale, probably this particular order of intervals is meant. One semitone, two semitones, one semitone, two semitones, etc. This symmetric construction. This is two. One semitone, three semitones, one semitone, three semitones, etc. So we will see that scales that consist of such symmetrical constructions are especially beloved in the 20th century music. We talked already about the formal structure of Debussy's piece. It is a ternary structure, ABA, ABA prime actually, and A section uses whole tone scale, B section uses pentatonic scale, and A section, again A prime section, uses whole tone scale. And you see an unbalance between measure numbers. The first section is the longest, and then a very short contrasting section, and then 17 measures, the A prime section. This unbalance actually resembles to conventional structures. For example, in sonata form, in a conventional sonata form, we have an exposition. And exposition is always repeated, played twice. And then comes the development section and recapitulation. So they are mostly also repeated as entirely, sometimes not. Let's say exposition is 10 measure long. It will be probably longer, much longer than, but for demonstration purposes, let's say it is 10 measures times 2. That makes it 20 measures. And the development section is almost always shorter than the exposition. Let's say it is 7 measure long. And recapitulation will not be repeated in this order. First, it will be half as long as the exposition. So you see here almost the same proportions, 41, 17, almost the half, and then 6 measures, very short B section. Now, structures based on sets. Sets can be used horizontally to create melodic line. Melodic, it is a question what melodic is, but I mean horizontal lines. So, and then vertically in order to create chords, and formally to create formal divisions. I'm going to give examples for all of them, beginning with the horizontal dimensions. This is a set, a pitch set, a very famous pitch set. Paul Zaher, a Swiss conductor, patron, and impresario, And this is so-called Zacher hexachord. Why Zacher hexachord? Because it is made from the letters of the name of Zacher. S with an E, added E at the before S, it means E flat in German. So A, C, it is the same English and German, A and C. H, this H corresponds to B natural also in German. In German, H means B natural. If you write only B, that means B flat in German. This is the difference between German and English. So H means B natural, and then E is the same. And R with an added E after that, it means Re. That means D. This is a very famous hexachord. The story is the following. To celebrate Paul Zacher's 70th birthday, Mstislav Rostropovich, a very famous Russian cellist and conductor, invited 12 composers to compose 12 pieces based on this hexachord, on the Zacher hexachord, in honor to Paul Zacher. So, and the composers, there were very famous composers among them, Luciano Berio, Pierre Boulez, Lutosławski, Holliger, etc. We are going to analyze a couple of them in the following lectures. This is how the hexachord sounds. A very characteristic hexachord. We are going to analyze a couple of pieces based on this hexachord, and you will see, although the pieces based on the same material or on these 6 pitches, they sound completely different from each other. So, what can we do with such a simple collection of pitches? This and the following slides are simple demonstrations of what can be done with such a simple hexachord. The first option is to repeat the pitches. You see, I repeated all the pitches here and then start over. So again here, E flat, E flat, E flat, etc. The only thing I've done is octave displacements. This is E flat 3 and this is E flat 4, E flat 5, excuse me, E flat 5 and E flat 4, and this is E flat 3 again, E flat 6. So it sounds not uninteresting. It is not a masterpiece, of course, but it doesn't sound uninteresting. Let's hear it. Although it is a very simple procedure, we are going to see Lutosławski used exactly this process. He repeated the hexachord many times without changing the order. And he creates an extremely interesting piece, in my opinion. We are going to analyze the piece in one of the following lectures. We can make it more interesting by adding some articulations, as I did here. I add some accents on some notes and then staccato. The passage is entirely in staccato, and I picked up some pitches. I brought some pitches to the foreground by adding accent on them. Let's listen to this version. In this version, we hear kind of aksak meter, and certainly it is more interesting than hearing every tone in the same volume level. We can do the structure more interesting by adding some dynamics, including some crescendi and decrescendi. Let's listen to this version. I hope you realize the thing is the differentiation between the elements. Differentiation, what belongs to the foreground, what belongs to the background, what is more important at the moment, and what is rather or what is less important for the moment. And that gives the music a structure. Actually, this is the meaning of the structure. This is what structure means. Differentiation between elements. What belongs to the foreground, what belongs to the background, what creates contrast, what is similarity, etc. So, and one more step to go is rhythmical complexity. If we change rhythms, if we put some irregularity to the structure, then we will have a more interesting structure. Let's listen to it. So, and I haven't done anything to the pitch material yet. I have 6 pitches, a pitch set, and I'm repeating it. I'm repeating it without changing the order. And even with such a simple procedure, I can create a listenable and interesting piece of music. And the second aspect is the vertical aspect, creating chords from a pitch set. Here you see multiple chords, 7 chords. Each chord consists of 6 pitches, namely the pitches of the Zacher hexachord. Once again, the only thing I've done is the changing the octave register. You see here E flat, E natural, and here E natural goes to here, and E flat goes one octave higher, and in the next one E natural comes here, and E flat goes one octave higher, and here E flat here, and here once again in the lowest position. And you will see how different each chord sounds. Let's listen to it. And there are many more possibilities, of course. Just a demonstration of what can be done by using only one pitch set. And formal structure. How can we create a formal structure by using a pitch set, a single pitch set? I'm going to demonstrate only one option. There are numerous possible options to do that. Let's take the semitones. Between E flat and A, there are 6 semitones. Between A and C, there are 3 semitones. By the way, I strongly recommend to get familiar with thinking in semitones. So, and then here 1 semitone, here 5 semitones, and between E and D, there are 2 semitones. What can we do with it? We can take them as bars, as measures. 6 measure, and then 3 measure, 1 measure, 5 measure, and 2 measure. What are those measures? Those are sections of our music. We can start, for example, with a section which contains shorter note values, which is in loud dynamic and linear, aka polyphonic texture, and with an aggressive character. And the second section, which lasts three measures. In contrast, could contain longer note values, softer dynamic, sustained chords, and could be in a peaceful atmosphere. In the third section, which is very short, we can use the elements from the first section. It is a very short and reminding of the first section. So, and then we can build a symmetrical construction. The first one, the third one, and probably the last one will be in similar character and with similar material, and the second one and fourth one will be in similar structure. And we can repeat or we can use the same structure, maybe not exactly the same, with a little aggression added from the first. This is like a mixture, like the dominant character will be the second part, but a little with an added aggression from the first part. So, and the last part, this is the final culmination in a chaotic character. That could be our piece. Maybe you think this is too short, only 6 measure, 3 measure, then you can multiply it. By the way, what we created here is a conventional formal structure, A, B, A, B, A. So you can multiply the measures. Instead of 6 measure, you can use 12 measure or 18 measure or more, 24, I don't know. Instead of 3, you can use 6, 9, 12. The thing is, keep the proportions. I'm talking about this case because we take this particular proportion of the between the intervals and applied it as a formal structure. So it is important to keep the proportion between the sections, but you can change the measure numbers. So by the way, I realized a mistake here. The second one, you should begin 2 or 4, etc. This is an example of a possible formal application. This is another example of using the scales as basis of the music. Let's listen to it. Maybe once again. The entire passage is based on the so-called Lydian mixolydian scale or sharp 4 flat 7 scale. This scale is especially favored by Debussy. It is a Lydian scale. If you assume this is a B natural, and it is a mixolydian scale if you assume this is an F natural. This is a combination of both modes. But there's another characteristic of the scale. If you take these notes, this is a major minor 7th, aka dominant 7th, this is C7 in this case, and the other tones, the tones between them, construct a D dominant 7th chord. As you see, in the 20th century music, the scales, the mostly favored scales are the scales that have a distinctive characteristic. It could be a symmetrical construction like one semitone, two semitones, and the repeating of this pattern. Or it could be like in this case, a combination of two different transpositions of the same chord. Messiaen's modes of limited transpositions are other very famous scales in the music of the 20th century. So there are 7 modes, and the first one is a whole tone scale. you can transpose it only 2 times, including the original version. In Messiaen's terminology, this is the first transposition, and if you transpose it again, if you write it on C sharp, then this is the second transposition. And if you transpose it again on D natural, we will get the same scale beginning with D. And then we have the octatonic scale. This is the second mode. It has only 3 transposition. That means we can write it beginning with C and then beginning with C sharp and beginning with D. If you write it again on D sharp, we will get the same scale, only it will start with E flat, C, D flat, and E flat, ends with E flat. Especially this one, the second one, the octatonic scale, is particularly favored by Messiaen. And there are also other, but you see the number of the possibilities of transposition increases. This is a very famous work by Messiaen, Quartet for the End of Time, the English translation, and this is the 6th movement. Let's listen to it and then talk about it. Before we talk about modes, I'd like to make some general explanation about the piece. First of all, we don't have any time signature. So why? Because, for example, 4/4, Messiaen could have written this in 4/4 plus 1/16 or 17/16 or something like that. Let's take this example, 4/4. That means that includes a hierarchy of the beats. The first beat is the strongest beat, and the second one is less strong. The third one is stronger than the second one, but less strong than the first one. And the last one is the least strong one. So Messiaen didn't want to have this organization, this hierarchy of the beats, but he still used bar lines in order to organize the music, to make it easier to read or to make the phrases clearer. This is one thing, and the second thing is, you see, the sustained tones or the points of repose are always on F sharp or on C. The longer durations we can continue F sharp here, C at the second one is longer. Tritone. Tritone is especially important in the music of the 20th century, as we partly see that the composers have a particular interest in symmetrical constructions. We saw, for example, hexatonic scale, 1 semitone, 2 semitone, 1 semitone, 2 semitone, and that continues symmetrically, or octatonic scale, 1 3 1 3, etc. So, and tritone is a symmetrical construction in itself because it marks exactly the half of the chromatic scale. It divides the chromatic scales into equal parts. That's why it is especially favored by many composers. Now that we know that Messiaen constructs his music on the modes of limited transposition possibilities, we can try to find out which mode is used for a particular passage. It changes all the time, like modulations in tonal music. There are also transitions between modes. Let's look at the first line. This is the violin line from the piece. So, and try to construct a scale from it. F sharp, then E, then we have B flat here, C, A flat, and that's all. And we have B natural here between B flat and C. We don't have D yet, but it looks like a whole tone scale. But if you consider this B natural, it couldn't be whole tone scale. It should be something else. If you look at by the way, it could also be a transposition of a particular mode, but I give you a clue. In this case, it is not a transposition. It is the original version, or it is the first transposition in Messiaen's terminology. So if we look at the modes, we will find this combination in its original form only here. B flat, B natural, C. We have A flat here, we have A sharp, we have E natural. This is the third mode. Messiaen didn't use those ones. And the first one, excuse me, the first one is used here. Three tones has been left out. So this is the third mode. But let's take a look at another passage. This one, beginning here at the end of this section. If you do the same thing, let's begin it with C. Do we have D flat here? Do we have D natural? No. And we have E flat. Do we have E natural? Yes, we have here E natural. And we have F sharp, G, A, and we have B flat. We don't have B natural, we don't have G sharp or A flat, and we don't have F natural. So, once again, it could be a transposition, but in this case, it is also in its original form, and we will see it is the octatonic scale, one of the most favorite modes by Messiaen. So another example, let's do the same thing. Let's begin with C, and then we have D flat, and E flat, and E natural. It looks like the octatonic scale here, the first note, and we have also F sharp and G. It continues until that point, F sharp and G. And we have also A here. B. Do we have B flat? Actually, this is another mode. Because of D natural here, it goes into another mode. Let's take a look only at that part. I just remember, as I analyzed this passage, it drove me crazy. I looked at all the modes and tried to find out what this is, and then I consider also the transpositions. I checked all the transposition to see if this could be one of the transposition. I couldn't figure it out what this is. It drove me crazy, but then I realized that there's a print mistake in the score. You see here B natural, but it has to be G natural. If I find the correct, this is it, yes. And if you look at other instruments, clarinet in B flat, it will sound G, and this is violoncello G, G, G. Only violin B natural. This is a print mistake. So it was supposed to be G, and if I replace it with G, G is already here, then it fits perfectly to the octatonic scale without B natural. The technique called added values is another very significant characteristic of Messiaen's music. What are added values? Added values are the values put to a regular rhythmic organization. Let's take this one. You see here a very regular rhythmic organization, regular in conventional sense. Tam, pa, pa, pam. Messiaen puts here a shorter value without touching any other element of the rhythmic structure. And then he gets this one. This is not tam, pam, pam, pam anymore. This is tam, tan, tan, ta, tam. This gives, the added values give a dynamic, a sort of aksak meter feeling to the music. The second one is also very simple, ta 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 ta. Messiaen comes here and puts a rest. And the music, tam, pam, 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 instead of this, pam, 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 pam. Once again, sort of aksak meter feeling. And here, the same 6/8 notes, he takes the last one and put an augmentation dot. And he gets then this version. There are a couple of ways to apply the principle of added values. This is our original pattern, a regular pattern. The added value could be a note, it could be a rest, or it could be an augmentation dot. In our example, we see added value, added note, added note, added note, augmentation dot, added note. There is no example of a rest, but it is also possible. So let's listen to the example once again. If you take an original music by Messiaen and make a simplified version of it. A simplified version means to remove all the added values, like here. This one, etc. In this 3-measure music, there are 4 added values, and if you remove them, we get a very boring version of the music. I'm playing now the original version. And now the second version. If you like the music in general or not, it is another question, but I'm sure you will agree with me that the second one is an extremely boring version of the original music. And this is a perfect example of the importance of details in the music. You see, tiny changes, very tiny additions to the music can make a huge difference in the result. We already talked about that chords based on modes, and there are a couple of examples from Messiaen's music. There's a chord, the lower part, the dominant seventh, and the upper part. And if we hear that together. So, what is the mode that the chord based on? Let's try to find out. Begin with C, we have D, we have E, we have F sharp, G sharp, and then B flat at B natural. This is what we have. You see here we have almost a whole tone scale and then a half tone step. This is the mode 3. You shouldn't get confused from the tones that have been left out. For example, E flat has not been used, and then G. So, two tones are left out, and we hear the other tones here in this chord. Another example is this one. We have a half diminished seventh, and this is the upper part. So if you do the same, it begins with G, and then we have D, we have E flat, E natural, and then we have G flat. Let's spell it as F sharp, G, and A flat, and B flat. And if we check the modes, then we will see it is also mode 3. This time you see exactly the construction, the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 tones at the same time without B natural. This is a wonderful work by Messiaen. This is a wonderful music. I strongly recommend to listen to it. The English translation is 20 Gazes on Child Jesus. And this is the first one, the gaze of the Father. Let's listen to the passage. What we hear in this passage is actually a chord progression consists of 3 chords only. If you look at the score, the first one is a F sharp major chord, and the second one is a C dominant 7th with an added 13th. So, and the third one is a weird spelling of E flat major or D sharp major. You see A sharp, D sharp, and G natural. E flat major. By the way, Messiaen uses such weird spellings all the time for tonal chords. Why? My opinion is that he wants to avoid tonal association. This is not E flat major chord for him. This is a sound. A chord consists of A sharp, D sharp, G, just sound. And it doesn't matter if it is E sharp major or D sharp major or any other spelling combinations. So, and then we have the first chord. Again, F sharp major. And at that point, we have the same chord progression again. So, this is a simplified spelling from the progression. G flat major in first inversion, C dominant 7th with added 13th, or substituted 6th, it is also possible, or substituted 6th. Both will give the same explanation, and then E flat major. Let's listen to this progression. As usual in Messiaen's music, this progression is also based on a particular mode. Let's try to find out which mode it is. Let's begin with C. That makes it easier to find the original version. If it is the original version, it could also be transposition. So we have then D flat and we have E flat. We have E natural here. And then we have G flat. Let's write it as F sharp and G. We have G here. And we have A natural. And we have B flat. We don't have B natural. This is also B flat here. This one is also B flat. So, and if we check the list of modes, then we will see that it is the second mode. It is the octatonic scale. This is probably the mostly favorite mode by Messiaen. And as you can see, it is also an interesting process to make an emphasis on particular characteristics that the mode contains. So in this case, Messiaen made an emphasis on the tonal sounding chords of the mode. Octatonic scale, it has nothing to do with tonality, but Messiaen picks pitches from the mode that creates a tonal sounding chord. D flat, F sharp, and B flat. It is G sharp, G flat major or F sharp major, and he picks E, A, B flat, and C, and creates a C dominant 7th with added 13th, and E flat, G, and B flat. He creates an E flat major chord. Another very famous chord in the music of the 20th century is the so-called alpha chord. This is a term introduced by Erno Landwehr. He used this terminology in order to explain some chordal structures in Bela Bartok's music. So, alpha chord is the following. We have a diminished 7th chord. In this case, we have a D diminished 7th. And then we have another diminished 7th chord. In this case, C sharp diminished 7. And please note that the upper one, the upper half, is the exact transposition of the lower part, one semitone, a half tone down. D diminished 7th and C sharp diminished 7th, they are superposed. And the sound is. So, it is a very characteristic chord, but not only that, it is also a collection, a pool of pitches with which you can create many interesting sounding chords. For example, you can take a couple tones from the one half, let's say from the lower half, and then a couple of tones from the upper half, and create your own sonority. So, for example, let's say I take D, A flat, and C flat from the lower half, and G and B flat from the upper half, and the sound is. And it doesn't have to be exactly in this order. We can transpose pitches. For example, let's transpose B flat here. Let's leave D flat here. I'm going to try the following. Then A flat, I will transpose A flat up. Let's say G. And also write B natural here. The sound will be. It is slightly different than the first one. And there are much more possibilities, of course. I strongly recommend that you experiment with the sound. Take a couple of tones from the upper part and a couple of tones from the lower part. There's no limitation. You can take 4 notes from the lower part and then 1 note from the upper part, 3 notes, 3 notes, or 2 notes, 4 notes. I don't know. There are numerous possibilities, numerous combination possibilities. But still, I'd like to create much more dramatic construction here. Only with octave transposition. I want to hear a minor ninth here. And then B flat is okay, D also okay, but I will give a bass note here. B natural. Let's hear it. And another possibility may be a very low D here, and then let's make an emphasis, let's reinforce the major sevenths, B natural and B flat here, A flat and G is here. Let's hear it. There are many more possibilities. And finally, the most common formal structures. We already talked about ABA form. We have an A section and then a contrasting B section. It could be contrasting in rhythmic structure, in melodic structure, in harmonic structure, in tempo, in texture, and in many more things. And then especially important is A prime. A prime should never be an exact repetition of the primary material. In tonal music, in common practice era, it could be an exact repetition, although it is very rare. There are always some differences, even though only slightly. But in the music of the 20th century, or in the atonal music, in the modern music, it is a rule of thumb. You never should make an exact repetition of the primary material. It's a difficult thing. At that point, we have to have the feeling that we are at the beginning again, somehow, but it shouldn't be the exact repetition. Maybe you can introduce only the harmonic structure with a different rhythmical construction, or you can only introduce the texture with different other parameters, etc. So it is you should be creative in this part. Another very common formal construction is process and resolution, a combination of process and after that a resolution of this process. We are going to see some examples of this formal construction, but briefly, there is not a contrasting material. Of course, there could be contrasting elements, but structurally, there is not a contrasting section. It is a process, a built-up process, and then the resolution. This is not a contrasting material. This is the same material. It could be a rhythmical process, for example. At the beginning, longer note durations, and then it could get shorter, etc. And at that point, the resolution could be some shorter note values and then one long. The process is being resolved and then longer, maybe one shorter note value, etc. This is the resolution of the process. An example for this process is from Bartók, Music for Strings, Percussion and Celesta. It is a very famous work. So, by the way, that was also a commission by Paul Zahar. Paul Zahar, remember Zahar hexachord? It was a very, very important person for the music of the 20th century. And this work was also commissioned by Paul Zahar. So the process here is a dynamic process from pianissimo to fortissimo and then back to the pianissimo, a shorter resolution part. That's all for this lesson. Thank you for watching and see you in the next lesson.